Okay, it's 5:29, and we're going to get started in just a moment. Let me just check my sound once again. Okay, the sound looks pretty good. I'm not sure if you got my message in the announcements. Perhaps you didn't. I became aware just this afternoon that tomorrow I will, in all likelihood, be in meetings till late in the afternoon for some of the things that happened in the schools last Wednesday. Of course, I'm sure that you've all seen it. We're going to talk about that specifically tonight for a little while, because this is the week that we talk about, ironically enough, psychological disorders. A couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I had to reschedule the Zoom session because of child abuse situation that was happening at my school at the time. And those things happen from time to time. The timing of that was just unfortunate in terms of our Zoom session. That wasn't the most unfortunate thing about it. The most unfortunate thing was the fact that I was dealing with a pretty severe child abuse case. And again, that in and of itself, not to minimize it, but that particular case, while tragic, was not unique. I won't necessarily say it happens every single day, but it is something that does happen from time to time. This, I'm sure you're well aware, we had another mass murder occur at a school last Wednesday, Valentine's Day. And in all likelihood, that's what I found out today, that there'll be meetings and consultations that I'll be involved in specifically because of what happened last Wednesday. For those who may not be aware or may not remember specifically, I'm an adjunct professor here at Central Christian College, and it's a job that I love. An adjunct professor typically means I work part-time. They ask me to teach certain classes each term, not every term, but it's usually just one class per term. And I always say yes because I love what I do here. But that is obviously not what I do full-time. My full-time job is that of a school guidance counselor, guidance director, certified school counselor. There's a lot of sort of different job titles that I have, but what the expectation is, one of them anyway, there's several, is to maintain a safe and orderly campus, done through the eyes, if you will, of counseling psychology and through the eyes of guidance and counseling and human relations. Over the years, like many jobs, mine has evolved. When I first started with the Broward County Schools back in the mid-90s, 1996, October of 1996, in fact, many things have changed. Technology being one of them, the expectations of what our responsibilities are as certified school counselors or guidance directors. And after 1999, April 20th of 1999, when those Dylan Klebold and his friend, whose name escapes me right now, became mass murderers at Columbine High School, we started to recognize that we had to make some changes because society was changing. So we started on our journey, counselors, teachers, everyone, custodians for that matter, obviously school administrators, district administrators, and started thinking about different ways to keep our school safe. Now, from a guidance perspective, one of the things that I promote and I claim is still very important is civility and human relations, being able to get along with people, peel that layer of the onion back, and then it's identifying individuals who have a hard time getting along with others. in spite of certain interventions and things such as that. And then more interventions are put in place. You peel back another layer of the onion, if you will, and you get to a smaller percentage, obviously, of individuals who perhaps have had a trying life, such as this 19-year-old named Nikolas Cruz has been reported. He was in foster care his entire life. He lost his foster care father at a very young age and lost his foster mother last November. Along the way, he had a lot of indicators that he was having a hard time. The most significant of those that we now know, if we didn't know before, and perhaps we did, is his cruelty to animals. That is a key indicator of someone who has, perhaps a psychological disorder, and that's what we're talking about now. That's one of the key indicators. In fact, sort of it's not armchair psychology. There are 3 indicators when for children that are red flags, if you will, that they are having a very hard time and need intensive psychological interventions. Otherwise, they will grow up, in all likelihood, with an antisocial personality disorder. The 3 things are cruelty to animals, playing with fire, and wetting the bed. So that's the big trifecta, if you will. When you hear about those things, in fact, when you look at some of the people that are famous that we know are psychopaths and sociopaths, and people like John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy and some of these people that we know are serial killers, they all had those indicators in their past. They wet the bed, in late, not when they're just toddlers or babies, but going in, they were cruel to animals and maimed animals and killed animals. And oftentimes they had a fascination with fire, playing with fire. So we know that this boy, Nikolas Cruz, this 19-year-old man, if you will, posted pictures of a mutilated frog. He claimed in one report that I read that frogs ran when they saw him coming because he would get them, because he put, whether it's true or not, that a frog had killed his dog, which if you're not familiar, there are certain frogs here in Florida. I'm not sure if there are other places that are poisonous, and dogs do like to go up and lick them, and they have poisonous or venom, I guess it is, really, on their skin. It's a protectant to them, and it kills dogs. So they're big. I think they're called bufo toads. I'm not sure. In any event, this 19-year-old kid, 19-year-old man, if you will, had a lot of indicators that he had a lot of stresses in his life, and he was not managing them well at all. And he also had indicated, given a lot of signs that he wanted to damage people and hurt people. He had posted at some point that he was going to be a professional school shooter, was the quote in the paper. And indeed, he did become that. So it happened at a Broward County school, and I work for Broward County Schools. My school is probably 10 miles from that school. And Broward County Schools, unlike schools in the Northeast and some other places, but not unlike all places, we are all one district. The entire county, although we're not, we're run by a school district, not the county government, but every school in Broward County, public school in Broward County, is under that same umbrella. So there are 30,000 employees and upwards of 300,000 students, as young as 3 up to adults in our adult education programs. this particular school, I didn't have a direct personal relationship with anyone who died, but or that worked there. Although I have sat in workshops and training with many people who are staff members at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And people that I work with, that I have spent time with this week, did have a direct personal connection, whether they knew them or were related to them. One of a staff member that we had with us 2 years ago, her children go there. They've been on the news quite a bit, very outspoken. There's a middle school right next to the high school. They pretty much share the same parcel of land, separated only by a small pond and a parking lot. That school obviously was on lockdown at that time. I do have two people there, one in particular that I am very good friends with. She was absolute, I shouldn't say she was a nervous wreck. When I finally got to speak with her, she had been fined because she had children in her charge that she was in charge of, and she had to remain calm in order to keep them calm. But she did say that she could feel it welling up in her, and she didn't know when it would come. It was going to come when it felt like coming, not when she wanted to, but she was going to sort of let loose with her emotions. Another gentleman that's there, friends with him, not quite as close. I don't know his family like I know the other person's family and their kids. He also was there, had to deal with that. A dear, very close friend of mine this is his second year in retirement. He was the principal of that middle school, the school that is right next door to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. So there's obviously, whether you're aware of it or not, if you're tuned into social media or the television, there is a rising now debate of, what should we do as a country? And certainly I encourage you to be involved and active according to your conscience. Just be informed would be my only thing that, if I may humbly suggest and request of you. But regardless of what side of this you're on, it's, there's a growing and what will probably be a raging debate of what causes these incidents, and it seems that people are sort of digging their heels into whether or not it should be, we should take, based on what I've heard, it's interesting because some people say they want to take away all the guns, and the other says, no, we don't want to take away all the guns. We just want to take away assault rifles from civilians. You can have your shotgun and your hunting rifle and your pistol, but we want to take away semi-automatic and automatic rifles because you can't hunt with them. It's illegal, and any hunter worth his salt would never go hunting wildlife or with a automatic rifle. It's not sporting. And then the other side who says it's a mental illness problem. That seems to be where people are digging their heels in. Where I stand, if again you'll formulate your own opinions. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I don't think that is an either or. I think it is a both and how far you want to go with background checks or whatever have you. It gets to be kind of a political debate that I'm not going to sort of mention here because it really isn't fair because no one else is on here, and of course we all have our opinions, but it would be really wouldn't be make a lot of sense for me just to put out there what I think. But I don't think anyone would disagree that that's a terrible tragedy and we should do something to avoid these things. Now, psychological disorders are fascinating, and when we study them this week coming ahead, we're going to get into it. I'm grading your work from last week. I was grading that this afternoon when I got the call that I'll be at a meeting tomorrow. But as you get into this, one of the things that you have to be careful of is that you don't start thinking you've got these disorders, whether it's ADHD or depression or whatever the case is, or you don't think that your spouse has these disorders. We call that a medical school syndrome, where when people go through medical school, they think they've got everything, whether it's emphysema or what's the other skin diseases, whatever the case may be. It's some of these things resonate. Where you watch out, or where you sort of catch yourself is, I'm distracted. But let's take ADHD or ADD for example. I get distracted. You may say to yourself, and have a hard time following through things, and I'm impulsive sometimes. But does it rise to the level that is impacting your life in a really negative way? There are people with ADHD. There's the owner of I'm not sure if it's JetBlue Airlines or one of the airlines. He embraces his ADD. It certainly is something that you can make work for you. It gives you energy. Typically, you can make decisions very quickly. You don't have fear. You don't typically stay down. If things don't work out, you kind of bounce right back. So anyway, don't think you have the disorders. The other thing that I did that I always talk about when we talk about psychological disorders, is what causes it. I have, for at least the last couple of decades and probably longer, have been of the opinion that it is neither, again, completely biological or completely environmental. I think it's a combination. And I a lot of times I'll equate this to children being raised in a home, and we talk about parenting styles, which I'm pretty sure we alluded to in this course some time back. And we have some parents who are what I call intentional and active. And if you have a kid with a good temperament, things are going to go fine probably either way. But if you have a child who needs a little attention, who may need you to help him learn how to make friends, or help her learn how to make friends, or help her learn how to manage his or her emotion, how to recognize emotions and feelings in others. If you have a child like that and you've got parents who parent with intentionality, a lot of times you'll be okay, except in extreme cases. And let's go to, say, extreme one, in which case those parents who are active and they try some things, say, this isn't working. Our child's still not getting along, not making friends in school, not following the rules at home or at school. So we're going to call in some professional help. So they get a counselor, or maybe talk to the school counselor, or what have you, talk to their pediatrician, whatever have you, and they start some behavior interventions. And typically that will help. So this guy or gal may not be perfectly, model citizen, but they'll manage their behaviors enough to get along. And then you got the extreme two, if you will, where it takes a little bit more extreme interventions and a lot more monitoring, and the monitoring goes on a little longer. So, the problem is when you have those kids in level 1 or level 2 who have the parents who do not parent with intentionality and are always reacting to situations rather than anticipating and trying to avert them before they happen. Parents who let television and video games entertain their child rather than engaging with them and building a relationship. I'm not knocking television or video games, although I could, but in moderation with the right video games, age appropriate, and television shows. I mean, that's fine. I watch television. My kids watch television. Don't get me wrong. But I do think you get my point that it isn't so much the television and video, it's the absence of the relationship between the parent and the child that is problematic. And then you go on to maybe develop some psychological disorder. So if you kind of caught my drift, you see there was some kids are just naturally okay, some kids who need a little help, some kids who have a home that is structured, and not rigid, but parent with intentionality, then you see both sides of it there, the biological as well as the environmental. Typically the word is not used biological, just so you know, going for, I use it a lot and I'm relaxed here. But if you're ever in a room full of psychologists, typically rather than say biological, we would say organic. You'll sound, much more part of the club, if you will. So no extra charge for that. So here's, with this, Nikolas Cruz, we see that he probably would have needed a lot of attention regardless. However, as it turns out, his parents, I'm not sure at what age, they may, or maybe it's just his mom, I don't know. Or maybe it was just his dad, I don't know. Gave him up for adoption, gave up his or her or their parental rights, perhaps when he was an infant. Seems, based on what I've read, certainly not past the age of being a toddler. So some very, presumably very caring and, loving people adopted him. Unfortunately, that it doesn't always work out, especially in this case where the man of the house, the foster father, died when he was very young. So here is an example of where you have someone who needed the extra support at home and did not get it. I have read that they also tried different interventions. It was in the paper that he had been diagnosed with a disorder and had been on medication. But I think that I'm certainly not knocking the mental health community. However, I think we don't have enough resources to deal with what we have to deal with. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We could go into funding. We could go into those folks in private practice trying to keep their practice afloat and getting the patients kind of in and out. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but I've heard that it has happened other times. Say with a psychiatrist, kind of get them in, get them out, and prescribe the medication, next, because they have medical insurance they have to pay, they have rent they have to pay, and student loans and everything else. So I wanted to point out that's a good example of where both environment, if you will, or surroundings, if you will, as well as the organic component played a part here. And I think that's the same for so much. Now, the other thing that I do like to touch on, let me see how we're doing for where's the, somehow or another I lost. No, that's not looking at. All right, well, somehow I did have the time down here. Anyway. Okay, anyway, I do want to go over the DSM and the axes here, give you a little bit of an edge up for the next psych class you take or ab psych class that you take. But I want to talk a little bit about two things, anxiety and depression. I'll begin with depression. Depression is what we call the common cold of mental disorders. Now, why do we call it the common cold of mental disorders? Well, there's a lot of reasons, or at least I should say there's more than one reason. One is it's very common, not unlike the common cold. Many people will suffer from some form of depression at some point in their lives. Will it be clinical? No, not necessarily, but it possibly could be. So that's like the common cold. It doesn't last like the common cold doesn't last. Oftentimes it goes undiagnosed, professionally undiagnosed, like the common cold goes undiagnosed because like, I got a cold, and you just go on, you take some aspirin or some cold medicine, and you go on to work and go on about your day, or you stay home in bed, whatever have you. Likewise, depression. Now, I'm not talking about blue days. Everybody has blue days from time to time. That's not clinical depression. You can say you're depressed. I'm having an off day. I feel depressed. You can feel depressed without being clinically depressed. In fact, you have at some point, whether you've been clinically depressed or not, you've also been depressed or having a blue day. Just because you have a blue day does not mean you're going to spiral into depression. So do not think that's going to happen just because you're depressed. And the other thing what the other reason we call depression the common cold or mental illness is because there are different kinds of colds, and there are many, many different kinds of depression. Some are very mild, it doesn't really impact you to a great extent. Might make it a little bit more challenging to make yourself go to work. It might make it a little bit more challenging to get along with people around you for a period of time. You maybe just don't feel good. You don't feel motivated for a period of time. And, it's kind of annoying, but it kind of comes and goes. Okay, you're fine. You move on. But then there are other depressive disorders that really knock you out. And sometimes people stay in bed for days, sometimes weeks. They just simply cannot get out of bed. And while it might be hard for us to get our mind around that, it is very real for those people. Like, why don't you, just shake it off? No, just shake it off does not work. And it's insulting. It is, if you've never experienced it, and thank God I haven't as of yet, sometimes depression can come on later in life, and I pray to God that He watches over me. But it's just, it would be like telling someone who has a broken leg to just run across the street. It's just not the same. The people with depression need our compassion. They need our love. They need our support. And they need us to just do our best to understand them and not judge them. And I'm running out of time, I'm sure. I don't know where my clock is. Nonetheless, it's bothering me. Talk about anxiety, which is a perfect intro here because I have my anxiety. I can see my clock. Anxiety abounds. It really dawned on me some months ago. Now I've always known about it since I was a kid, but I kind of put it in this pocket. But about, I don't know, half a dozen months ago, or 6 or 7 months ago, it just really came to the forefront. Because one of the things that I recognize is the incivility in society, and it's something that bothers me. Case in point with this mass murderer, to put it mildly, I guess. But so much of that is caused by anxiety. If you just, because we're moving along in our day, and we have our things we have to accomplish, and sort of, for myself, I have to manage my stress and manage my anxiety. And I do that by deep breathing and, of course, praying and meditating and reading the Bible, all of which I don't do enough of, probably on most days anyway. But I just stopped for a second and just started observing people. Even I've been doing this for a while. You could probably notice some of this yourself if you just pay close attention. People fidgeting, the nervousness of some people, even watching people check out, trying to get that shortest line in the grocery store, and not just because they're competitive and they want, but they're so anxious, not stressed, anxious and stressed to get out of there and get back home or get on to their next task, because we're stretched so thin in many places that we're becoming more and more anxious as a society, and it's impacting all of us. Even if you manage your stress very well, and stress and anxiety are not the same. They're related, but they're not the same. And I won't go into stress too much in this talk, but even if you don't have anxiety and things are going well for you, you're impacted because everyone around you is dealing with it, or most people around you are having to deal with it. So, and I always make the connection, this is biblical. This is absolutely biblical. If you um, going through the scriptures, Jesus knew this. God knew this. This is why we are counseled more than anything else in the Bible. Our biggest, I won't say commandment, but our biggest, or I should say most prolific, most frequent um, advice from Jesus is do not worry, be anxious for nothing. Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, nor do they spin, yet your heavenly Father provides them. Don't worry. That was his whole Sermon on the Mount, or a good part of it. I've got you. He doesn't want us to be anxious. He told us we're going to have a hard time. Different, okay? He told us we're going to go through difficult times. In fact, even suffer. But even in our suffering, do not be anxious because the end is already written. And you know, our future is his history, if you will. You know, maybe not the best way to say it, but and as we go on and you read about end time prophecies in Revelation and even Timothy and other places in the Bible talks about when the time is coming near, the end of time when Jesus comes again. And I think we could probably, most of us would agree, regardless of our religion or faith, if you will, or denomination, I should say, that the Bible's pretty clear that Jesus will come again. And when that time gets closer, men will die from fear, anxiety, if you will. And anxiety is sort of the fear of what might happen. And that's one of the differences between anxiety and stress. Stress is happening. Okay, I got this report due, that report due, that report due. They're all due in 5 minutes, and I have, you know, that's stress. Okay, which can cause anxiety. But anxiety is the perceived reality, if you will, like what might happen. The Bible says people die from that. And we have evidence of that happening. You know, people talk about diet, that's important, and fatty foods and what have you. People die of heart attacks. And a friend of mine was recently took her daughter in. Her daughter was having some digestive issues, and she went in for an endoscopy, and they were thinking that she had, kid's 15 years old, kid might have ulcers. My friend, colleague told me, I couldn't believe it, that the waiting room was packed. Okay, that's not good. But this is a pediatric GI doctor. He doesn't see people over 18 or maybe 21. There were young kids in there. You know, this is due to more than one thing, but one of those things is the anxiety in our society, even that we're putting kids through. So that's a real disorder. You know, social anxiety disorder is a real disorder. And if you are taking this course and you're a psychology major and you know, you're going to have plenty of work. I'm not going to say you'll make a lot of money. You may or may not. But there is no shortage of work in the field of psychology. So I'm just going to finish up here with the axis. You have it here. When someone goes in for a diagnosis, you know, we have what's now called the DSM-5. DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorders. And it's written by psychiatrists and medical doctors. Well, psychiatrists are medical doctors, but it's a medical manual, and even mental health counselors use it, social workers use it, and they haven't been to medical school necessarily, and you know, I'm sure almost none of them have. But this is what they go through, and then you come up with a diagnosis. Now, the Axis 1 is the major clinical disorders. That's going to be things like your ADHD, bipolar disorder. That it's not a mild thing. It's a major. It's a clinical disorder. Okay, you know, it's one thing to say you're depressed. It's another thing to say you have depression. We've all been depressed. We haven't all had depression. That's axis one. Then the axis two disorders, they're even more problematic. That's your personality disorders. Personality disorders are those disorders that are like antisocial personality disorder, which some people call them sociopaths or psychopaths. These are people who just they don't have remorse, they don't have any kind of empathy for people, and not all of them are criminals, and not all of them are in jail, but they will think nothing about hurting someone if they can gain from that. Also, in the axis two personality disorders is dissociative identity disorder. Dissociative identity disorder is what we used to call multiple personality disorder. And it's a very interesting disorder, and there are some who completely discount it. It's hard to completely discount it when you see some of the, obviously, and you see yourself some of the videos, and it's easy to get those. Now, when I used to teach this course, 15 years ago, it was, getting a tape of someone conducting therapy or, talking in different voices or whatever have you. That was like gold. But now you just, you got them on YouTube, and we have them here in the course room as well. But those are more problematic. They're harder to treat. They're less sort of quote unquote curable, less treatable. Then the axis 3 is the physical symptoms. Let's say somebody has an anxiety disorder, which would be on the axis 1. It's a major clinical disorder. So, and then maybe they pick at their skin. Okay, so now that's causing a problem because the skin's getting infected. Other physical symptoms would be someone with depression who is gaining weight, if you will, or maybe losing weight. It could be either thing. Then the axis 4 is the social and cultural factors. And one of the first things a therapist will ask you, one of the things, in fact, I just was talking to another friend of mine today whose mother's in the hospital, and they go through the whole, they didn't used to always do this, but if you've been in the hospital or know someone who has recently, they go through this little checklist when you check in, who lives with you, who takes care of you, do you go to church regularly or synagogue or mosque or whatever the case is. They look for those social and cultural factors. Do you have a social support system? Do you get along well with your family, your neighbors, your friends? How big is that system? Are there people in your neighborhood like you? For instance, if you are in, many of you in the class are from the Midwest, and it's probably changing quite a bit now, but there was a time when, the cultural factors, if you were Jewish or if you were a Hindu or Muslim and you would have not many people like you. There's not a lot of synagogues or mosques to attend out there. So that would be something that would impact it. And they put all those together, and then you get your axis 5, which is the GAF score. And I take, one of the reasons I like to talk about this, I take a big issue with the GAF score, which is the Global Assessment of Functioning. Okay, that's a number between 0 and 100 or 1 and 100. And it's looked at from a problematic standpoint, and that's my issue with it. If you are industrious and you work very hard, such as your humble professor, and you have a full-time job, say with a major school district, and you also teach classes, you would think that would go, on the positive side, and it, in some ways it can, but my GAF score may be impacted by that, because that may mean that you don't have enough time to socialize and those kind of things. So it's always looking at it from a problem or a problematic lens, if you will. No one ever has a score of 100. Even if you work 9 to 5 and get 8 hours of sleep a night and everything, they seem to find something to pick on, whether your diet or, something along those lines. Typically the GAF scores you see with patients is around 60. It can be very low, obviously, if it's very problematic. But even people who are not in therapy, who just, if you go through all these things, as a graduate student, you may do some of this with some of your fellow classmates, and just here's a guy who's going along very well. It's going to be like 85, 90, because you find some things there's a whole sort of a list that you go through. Anyway, with that, we will end here. And rather than a Bible verse, we're kind of down here in my area. We're kind of going with MSD Strong. It's not a political statement by any account. It just basically means that MSD is Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and that's the school. And it just basically means that our thoughts and prayers and support is with that community. And so we're going to go with that for our extra credit, MSD Strong. I do hope that you'll keep those folks in your thoughts and prayers. And as we move forward, regardless of what side you're on politically, something that we used to do a lot better in this country was try and find some common ground to find solutions. And rather than knock the other side down, try and build our vantage point up. And dare I say, as the Bible counsels, try and build your opponent up. That is actually where you'll find real solutions. Of course, this side of heaven, that's a tall hope, I guess. In any event, this is week 6, so it's has been and will continue to be my absolute pleasure being with you. If you have any questions or want to reach out to me in any way, of course, the best way is through the message tab. If you have any assignments that are out there, just be aware, be knowledgeable, be thinking about this. I'm happy. I'm working with you here. I know things happen. I know what it's like to be an adult student. A lot of obligations. I'm not here to knock you down. I'm here to lift you up. I will do everything I can to be fair to your classmates as well as you, to accept a late assignment. Now, again, pardon me, there's, if someone has submitted their assignment on time and done a great job and earned, let's say full credit, and you're turning your assignment in late, unless there's a, very real, reason for that, and sometimes there is, you'll get a passing score, but it may not quite meet what others have done. But nonetheless, do get those in. What I'm leading up to is this. Couple things. We have until Sunday at midnight. Then we're shut down. I cannot accept anything after this coming Sunday at midnight, because the course will be shut down not only to you, but also to me. Of course, I have access to the gradebook, as do you, because I will have to grade everything, and I must have grades submitted no later than next Wednesday, which I'll just point out that, I don't have 3 days because I have other obligations and what have you. So I work really hard to get those grades every week. I do, but with the end of the course, I can't play around, if you will. And I don't have 3 full days because I have a full-time job. I got to get these things in. So having said that, get them in as soon as you possibly can, so that I have a chance to go in and grade those this week, while I'm also keeping up with this week's discussion. And that I'm being as fair as I can to you. Please, as much as you possibly can, keep fairness to your humble professor in mind as well. I do want to see you succeed. And then we'll go through this week again. You know how to get in touch with me. We'll end Sunday at midnight, and that'll be it. You'll go on. Maybe I'll see you again. I sure hope I do. There's actually some really quality work going on in here, and we'll see what happens. And then I got another course to teach next time, and you'll probably have other courses to take as you move forward. So I'm praying for you and your families. So keep up the good work, and I'll talk to you soon.